Hello everyone, welcome back to Raptors Report. I said in my last video that I would make another one of these videos if the last one did well, and as you can see, here I am. I'm sitting in the trade slop trash can, ready to bring you some fun, hypothetical trades that I came up with. You can let me know if I'm a hater or a homer. Let me know anything about the video in the comments section. But without any further ado, let's get to the fake trades. So, first trade idea, okay? Chris Boucher for Kevin Huerter, straight up. And I mentioned in the last video that Chris Boucher I expected him to be traded in this offseason. And the first thing we got to talk about is, why would the Kings do this? Kevin Huerter is younger. He's a starter, or has been a starter for a long time in his career. And he's probably a bit more valuable in terms of the type of player that he is. So let's start. Kevin Huerter had a down season. So we'll go to his stats and we'll take a look here. He had his worst points per game total since his rookie season. He also had his worst shooting season since ever. Generally, he just had a poor season by his standards. And he was actually really good the season prior to that. He was a very important part of the Kings team, what they did. Used dribble handoffs from Domantas Sabonis. There were a whole bunch of things that he did for them that were very valuable. Halfway through, I believe it was March, he had shoulder surgery and his season was over. And that's part of the reason the Kings kind of flamed out in the playoffs. Or before the playoffs, in the play-in. So he had a bad year, but that's not all, okay? Let's talk about what the Kings need to do this offseason. There is a big cap crunch coming for them, and there's one guy that has become a star for them, who is Malik Monk. And Malik Monk, I've mentioned him before as a candidate for the Raptors to sign in the offseason. I still think it's possible, although not very likely. But as you can see, the Kings are close to the luxury tax threshold. And I don't think they have an appetite to go into the luxury tax. If you read any of the reports, the idea is that Malik Monk will probably command a contract larger than $21 million per season, which of course would put them squarely into the tax. So let's think about this. We're going to go back up to the first slide here. As you can see, Kevin Huerter makes $16 million per season. Chris Boucher, on the other hand, makes $10 million a season. So if the Raptors were willing to absorb the larger contract, they would be able to take him onto the team, because Chris Boucher essentially reaches the threshold just barely on how much money is allowed between the two salaries. So 16 million and 10.5 million, that's pretty much the biggest gap you can get for that salary. So the Raptors would be offering the Kings about $6 million extra to play with under the luxury tax. For the Raptors, it would be a buy low situation. Kevin Huerter is a starting caliber player who has been a very good volume shooter, movement shooter, and he's also 6'7". He's not a small player. So you could play him next to Emmanuel Quickley. You could play him next to other guards. You can have him come off the bench. You could have him start. He has a very valuable skill. And the other thing is that he, unlike a lot of players in his archetype, is not a disastrous defender, or hasn't been for the majority of his career. I would say, is slightly below average, but not a guy that is going to completely torpedo your defensive scheme. The Kings would be able to sign Malik Monk, and the Raptors get a large movement shooter that would work very well in Darko's system. And Boucher, as you are probably well aware, but at this point, is in Darko Rajakovic's doghouse. And I like him as a player. He's good enough that he shouldn't get that kind of treatment. So I think if he went to the Kings, he would have an opportunity to come off the bench and play quite a few minutes. I think he'd help the Kings. I think that they could use a player like him. So that's my first trade. let's move on to the next one. Trade idea number 2. This trade is between the Raptors and the Utah Jazz. So the Utah Jazz, if you are not aware, have recently stated that they are kind of sick of being in the basement. They're interested in actually putting a good team around Lauri Markkanen and Colin Sexton and trying to make some noise in the Western Conference. Is it a good idea? I don't know, because the Western Conference is very good, but that is what they said that they wanted to do. Jordan Clarkson won Sixth Man of the Year 3 seasons ago, as you can see right here. That was when he was 28. And he got a big contract from the Utah Jazz, and now he's 31. And don't let the points per game fool you. He is inefficient. As you can see, he's shooting under 30% from 3, close to 40% from 2. He's very streaky. He's a poor defender. And he's owed another year on his contract after this coming season. So that's kind of why I think that the Jazz would be a good team to look at for Bruce Brown's market. Now, let's take a look at the other details that are exchanged in the trade here. Now, first of all, the Toronto Raptors would be receiving the number 10 pick in this year's draft. And sort of to balance the scales a little bit, the Raptors would be sending back the 31st pick. Because while I think there is a substantial difference between Jordan Clarkson and Bruce Brown in terms of worth, the pot needs to be slightly sweetened from Utah's perspective. Let's talk about why they'd want Bruce Brown. So Bruce Brown is 1 season removed from winning a championship and being a key cog in Denver's playoff run and subsequent championship. So the Jazz, no surprise, they've been a poor defensive team, and part of that is because they're playing Jordan Clarkson 30 minutes plus a game. And Bruce Brown would allow them to have a guard swing that could guard the other team's best player and not give up a gazillion points. Could play him next to Sexton. He would just be a good fit on their team. He would be a connector for some of their other scorers. Jordan Clarkson is more of a combo guard. He likes to dominate the ball. Bruce Brown would maybe be more of a floor stretcher, more of a connective player, a defender. He would be a good role player for their system. Now, let's talk about the long and short of it. Danny Ainge, as I mentioned before, says he wants to build a competitive team around Lauri Markkanen. The Raptors take on that extra year of Jordan Clarkson's deal because Bruce Brown his contract is up at the end of the season. And the Raptors throw in the 31st pick in the draft to make it a little fairer. And the prize for that, for all of this that's going back Utah's way, is that the Raptors get the 10th overall pick. And Jordan Clarkson could eat minutes off of the bench for the Toronto Raptors. He wouldn't have to play 30 minutes a game. And in fact, I think it would be a bad idea to play him 30 minutes a game. And the Raptors have been looking for a backup guard for a long time, and I think he could fill that role. All right, let's move to the next trade. Trade idea number 3. And this would be Bruce Brown for Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt, plus the LA Lakers 2024-25 pick. So next year's first-round draft pick, unprotected. A lot to unpack here. There's more than one player coming back to Toronto for Bruce Brown. So let's talk about one of those players. Let's talk about Gabe Vincent. Gabe Vincent had a crazy, some would say, and I would say, fluky run during Miami's run to the NBA Finals last season. And he was on fire against Boston. He had a couple of other good rounds. He didn't do very well in the finals, but everybody kind of went crazy for the guy, and the Lakers saw what he did, and I feel like their front office is all about name appeal, which will help the Raptors here. But he's not been a good signing for them. First of all, he's been injured. He was injured most of the season. But beyond that, I just think he's not the player that he showed last season in the playoffs. That was kind of a one-off thing. And the Lakers, frankly, they bought high. Pesky defender, and you can run the pick and roll with him a little bit. He can handle the ball a little bit. He's not worth $11 million over 2 seasons, which is what they're paying him. So this would be a bit of a salary dump for them. And let's move on, because the salary dump does not stop there. We'll look at Jared Vanderbilt's stats and talk about who he is as a player. So as you can see, it's not very impressive. The stats aren't really what Jared Vanderbilt, why he's a useful player. He is a defensive player. He is a very good defender. He's large, he's got long arms. He can guard the pick and roll pretty well. If you need him to come out to the perimeter, he can guard perimeter players pretty well. But he is a defensive, non-shooting power forward, as I mentioned right here. And those kinds of guys are not worth very much in the NBA. They're probably one of the most replaceable archetypes of players, and they've largely been phased out of the NBA. You don't see a lot of those types of players. And the reason for that is because modern offenses, the way that they work is that you can have pretty much one non-shooter on the floor max. You cannot afford to run even 2 guys who cannot shoot the ball. And almost all teams these days, the guy who cannot shoot the ball is your center. And centers are extremely valuable on defense. That's pretty much the reason that you have them on the floor, much more so than, say, a forward. Forwards don't guard the basket as much. They don't have as big an impact on defense, so teams go basically, if we're going to have one non-shooter, let's just have one center. And you can see that's reflected in his minutes. He only plays in the low 20s for LA. He was injured this season. He didn't play in the playoffs this year. But last season, they couldn't really play him very much against Denver, even against Memphis and some of the other teams. His minutes took a drop. And the reason for that is because, like I mentioned, modern offenses require you to shoot. And if you can't shoot, teams don't guard you. So you can't really have a player like him and a player like Anthony Davis on the court at the same time. And if you look at the bottom here, he's going to be paid $13 million 4 years from now because he has a player option on the 4th year. So that's, yeah, he's not a good contract. So let's talk about the trade as it stands. We can go back and take a refresher on what it looks like. So the Raptors would be getting 2 essentially kind of overpaid role players plus next year's draft pick for the Lakers in exchange for Bruce Brown. And so let's talk about why the Lakers would like that. First of all, they get off 2 bad contracts. Pretty self-explanatory. Second of all, Bruce Brown is a useful role player. He played very well next to Kevin Durant. He played very well next to Nikola Jokic. And LeBron James and Anthony Davis, he would probably play well next to those guys as well. He kind of, you want to put him next to an alpha so that he doesn't have to handle the ball very much and he can do his connective thing where he guards the other team's best perimeter player. He's disruptive on defense. He can make some plays. He can get out in the open court. They would like a player like that, especially next to Austin Reeves as well. For the Raptors, yes, they are getting 2 guys who are overpaid, but that's kind of how you get draft picks. If you look at what Oklahoma City and Sam Presti have done over the past, 15 years in the NBA, they have traded their cap space in return for draft picks. And that's what the Raptors would be doing here. They would be taking on 2 bad contracts in exchange for the Lakers' first-round draft pick. And Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt, maybe they're not great players, but I don't think they're quite useless. Vanderbilt, as I mentioned here, would actually be a decent pairing with Kelly Olynyk off of the bench, because as you know, Kelly Olynyk, his strength is shooting the ball and being useful on offense, and his weakness is that he's not a good defender. So that would actually be a pretty good pairing with Jared Vanderbilt if they decide to keep Kelly Olynyk. As for Gabe Vincent, the thing that I said about Jordan Clarkson applies here. They need a guy to come off of the bench and eat minutes. And although I don't think that Gabe Vincent can really play next to Emmanuel quickly, I don't imagine him requiring as many minutes. But there is some marginal utility in bringing him off of the bench and allowing him to run the second unit. And that's pretty much it. I made 3 trades. I think that I would like them if the Toronto Raptors did them, but the question is, do you? Let me know in the comments. Drop a like on the video if you thought it was interesting, worthwhile, you liked it. Subscribe if you like this kind of content. And, you know, hit me up on Twitter @RapsReport. I always enjoy hearing from other Raptors fans.